it for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur. Oh!
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the ball!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Stanley pour les Canadiens, le 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup!
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Vida TV. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination. It's gonna be sick.
Marinaro, the Sick Podcast on this Tuesday, May 14. It is 3 minutes past 10 o'clock, and we are live on the Sick Podcast tonight. And I've told you that for most of the playoffs, we're not going to be going live because games are going on, and the Boston Bruins moments ago avoided elimination and beat the Florida Panthers by a score of 2-1. Who would have bet on that, considering the Bruins lost game 2, lost game 3, lost game 4, lost Brad Marchand. You thought the Panthers had the momentum, and now they're going back to Boston for game 6. And I know, look, I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but imagine what a storyline it would be if the Boston Bruins would do to the Florida Panthers what the Florida Panthers did to the Boston Bruins 1 year ago, and that is come back from a 3-1 series deficit and actually win the series. But we're not there yet because, once again, they're going back for game 6, and the Panthers could obviously win that game. So we'll see what happens. I have an eye on Vancouver and Edmonton, and right now it is scoreless 7 minutes into period number 1. Speaking of which, my buddy George Larac is in Edmonton, and George is going to join us on the Sick Podcast, most likely on Thursday of this week, with our regular collaborator Craig Button of TSN joining me tomorrow when it's going to be Wednesday. Tonight, I'm going solo. And was the plan to go solo? No, not really. The plan was not to go solo, and I'll explain to you what happened. But I'm definitely well prepared for the show. I'll tell you that right now. But I'm okay to go solo. The Sick Podcast brought to you in part by Energy Transportation Group. Once again, recognized as one of Canada's top fleet employers for the 4th consecutive year. The prestigious accolade underscores their dedication to fostering a workplace of excellence and opportunity, much in part to their exceptional team for their unwavering commitment and contribution. Energy Transportation Group, a top fleet employer. Good for you, Mike Chiquino and Sean Gerard and David Grassi. Love those guys. Also brought to you in part by La Bite TB, brewed in Quebec whenever it does international awards. La Bite TB offers quality microbrewery beers made with premium ingredients for everyone's taste. La Bite TB, embrace your true nature. Also want to talk to you about the WPT Montreal. It's taken over Playground once again, featuring 2 live streamed and fully televised events. Dive into the action with the WPT 500 Montreal Championship, WPT Prime Montreal Championship, and the Grand WPT Montreal Championship with over 4.2 million in total guarantees. It's a series you won't want to miss. Mark your calendars for May 9th to May 22nd for nonstop poker excitement. For more information, visit playground.ca. Don't miss out on the action at Playground, where the cards come alive. Also brought to you in part by Accent Insurance Solutions. You know, all insurance isn't created equal. You know where to find the right solution for you. Accent Insurance, that is. Accent doesn't sell insurance. They shop insurance for you to find the right product right on the money, whatever your insurance needs, home, automobile, or business. Call the Accent team today at 514-363-3636 and get the right solution at the right price. Visit their website at accentassurance.com. We're now, and I'm giving you a live update, even though when some of you are going to be watching this maybe tomorrow and whatever, you'll already know the score of the hockey game, but 9 minutes into period number 1 in game 4 of this series, with Vancouver leading 2-1, a game that's taking place, of course, in Edmonton. It's scoreless right now at 0-0. Okay. May 14 is a date that I'm never going to forget. There are dates in Montreal Canadiens history where things happen and you're like, man, I'm never going to forget this. Either an amazing goal, either an amazing game, either an amazing playoff win. either an amazing performance. This was one of the ugliest, scariest, most unique bench clearing brawls in the history of the National Hockey League. And those of you who are watching right now who are of a certain age, and I'm 51, and in 1987, I was like 14 and a half years old. I remember this like it was yesterday. And I'm going to try and give out as much information to some of you who are watching as possible. The Canadiens are playing the Philadelphia Flyers in the semis. And I don't exactly know. Oh, and by the way, I told you that, the plan would have been to have Knuckles Nilan on the show tonight, but Chris is in Hawaii. And as we speak, there's a time difference with Hawaii, by the way. As we speak, I believe that Chris is at the beach, okay? So he can't make it, but we'll show you a little video from Chris a little bit later on. Shane Corson was very much involved in the brawl, and I would have loved to have had Shane on if Chris couldn't be on, and he couldn't make it, and I couldn't get a hold of Claude Lemieux. So, I look, there's a lot of players I could have called, but I really wanted to call somebody who was involved in one of the fights that night. And Knuckles Nilan was involved in a big fight with Dave Brown. And John Kordick was involved in a big fight with Stanley. And McPhee was involved in a fight with Tocchet. And Corson was involved in a fight with Knockbauer. And, I couldn't get a hold of any of those gentlemen. And Claude Lemieux was in a fight with Ed Hospodar. So I don't remember when the superstition happened, but at one point, Claude Lemieux and Shane Corson had this superstition that in the pregame warm-up, they wanted to shoot the puck in the empty net. And the Flyers caught on. And the Flyers at one point, and I believe it was game 4, they caught on and they took the net. And I believe it was Chico Resch, who was the backup goaltender to Ron Hextall, who was just unbelievable in the 1987 NHL playoffs. So unbelievable that the Edmonton Oilers went on to beat the Philadelphia Flyers in the Stanley Cup final in 7 games. And guess who won the Conn Smythe that year as playoff MVP? It was Ron Hextall of the losing Philadelphia Flyers. Hextall was unbelievable. When Hextall was on his game, that was Hextall, and he was knocking his stick from post to post, to crossbar to post to post. And if you watched Hextall back then, you absolutely know what I'm talking about. The Flyers back then carried a lot more extra bodies than the Canadiens did, or dressed extra bodies. Because there at the time you could put as many players out on the ice for the warm-up as you wanted. So anytime you'd have a warm-up, the Flyers would have 6 or 7 more players on the ice than the Canadiens. In game 4, I believe it was Chico Resch who actually caught on and took the net and pushed it up against the boards and turned it around so that the Canadiens could not score into the empty net. And the Flyers went on to win that game. And by the way, it looks like Leon Draisaitl has scored, and the Edmonton Oilers have taken a 1-0 lead. Let me just confirm that it's Draisaitl. McDavid to Draisaitl, bang. One-timer, bang, bang play. Yeah. Bouchard to McDavid to Draisaitl. Goal. All right, okay. So the Flyers won game 4, and so they became superstitious. And at one point, they absolutely didn't want the Canadiens to score into that empty net in the warm-up. So the Canadiens had the superstition, or at least Corson and Lemieux had the superstition. And then the Flyers, when they stopped them by putting the net against the boards and turning it around, and the Flyers won the game, then the Flyers said, you know what? We got to keep on doing this. So they were trying to get into each other's heads. In game 5, the Flyers did the same thing. And then at one point, Corson and Lemieux, I think, were able to take the net off of the boards, put it back on its pegs, and score into the empty net. And I think Claude Lemieux ended up scoring a goal that game. So the Flyers said to themselves going into Game 6, we will wait on the ice, and we're going to stay on the ice the whole time, and we're going to basically protect our net, defend our net, stand in front of our net, and we're not going to make Corson or Lemieux score into the empty net. So Corson and Lemieux were out there, and they were passing the puck to each other, but Hospodar and Chico Resch were on the ice. And so what Corson and Lemieux did was they waited for Hospodar and Chico Resch to get off the ice. And when they got off the ice, and they pretended like they were going back into their locker room, they immediately came out, jumped back onto the ice, and Shane Corson was ahead of Claude Lemieux. He scored in the empty net. Chico Resch and Ed Hospodar weren't able to get there on time. But once they got there, Chico Resch, I think, took a swipe with his stick at Claude Lemieux, missed him, but Ed Hospodar grabbed him. Let's see if and Hospodar is wailing away at Lemieux, and he's punching Lemieux. I think we have a picture, and Claude Lemieux is kind of like trying to protect his face, and Hospodar's giving it to Lemieux. Do we have a picture by any chance of? There we go. We have it. That's what's going on. Now, Shane Corson, who is more than happy to engage in the fisticuffs, he's watching Hospodar give it to Lemieux. No one had any idea why Lemieux was actually not throwing any punches, and he was just protecting himself the way he did. And Corson didn't want to get involved because Corson was afraid that he was going to be the third man in. Third man in, ejected from the game, such an important game with the Canadiens trying to fight off elimination, down 3-2. So he didn't want to fight back. There's some information I didn't mention here. So the game was on Radio-Canada, La Soirée du Hockey, on television. And the Brawl is going on while there's other programming that's taking place. So when they finally get to La Soirée du Hockey on Radio-Canada, they inform everyone watching that there's a lot of stuff that went down at the Montreal Forum, and we have the images for you. The broadcast was delayed about 17 minutes. The hockey game actually started about 35 minutes late before they gave out all penalties. And by the way, and Ed Hospodar was, they claimed that he was the one who started it, so he was the one who actually got a game misconduct. Didn't matter, he wouldn't have played anyway. $24,500 in fines were issued. I believe the only players who were not fined were Patrick Roy, who was the backup goaltender for that series because Jean Perron, the head coach of the Canadiens, went with Brian Hayward in those playoffs. Went with Brian Hayward. And Ron Hextall wasn't fined either because Hextall wasn't on the ice. Why wasn't he on the ice? I'll tell you in just a couple of minutes. So they get to La Soirée du Hockey on Radio-Canada, and they start telling you crazy events here at the Montreal Forum. I mean, it happened moments ago. Shane Corson and Claude Lemieux jumped onto the ice. Chico Resch and Ed Hospodar jumped onto the ice, and Claude Lemieux, Shane Corson scored into the empty net, and Chico Resch swung a stick, and Ed Hospodar grabbed Claude Lemieux and started punching him. And then all of a sudden, Lemieux actually flips Hospodar over and gets on top of him. At that point, all four of them are looking at each other saying, what are we doing here? This is stupid. Like, what are we doing here? Like, let's just stop. What are we doing here? They're probably all scared they're going to get penalized or they're going to get suspended. And then a trainer so the story goes, a Philadelphia Flyers trainer runs into the Flyers room and tells everyone, you got to get on the ice. You got to get on the ice. There's a big scrap going on and all that stuff. An usher from the Montreal Forum goes into the Canadiens dressing room. You imagine if this was today in 2024, it's an usher that goes into the Canadiens dressing room, tells them, big scrap going on the ice, big scrap going on. So the first one, I'm sure you won't be surprised to, you're not going to be surprised to know this. The first one to actually get on the ice right away and tie his skates, Patrick Roy was the first one to get on the ice, along with, because Roy was actually watching as I think that goal was being scored into the empty net, and Chris Nilan. Nilan makes his way onto the ice right away, and then I think Brad Marsh and maybe Dave Poulin, if memory serves me well, were among the first ones to get on the ice for the Philadelphia Flyers. Doug Crossman, who's a Philadelphia Flyers defenseman, he was wearing his flip-flops, his sandals, when he made his way onto the ice. Can you imagine? He gets stepped on. This guy loses all his toes. That's how scary it was. It was also very scary because as everyone started to make their way on the ice, once again, the Canadiens were outnumbered by about 6 or 7 players. So that's another reason why it was scary. Dave Brown comes onto the ice like a man on a mission. He actually, I'm telling you, he looked like he had the presence of the Undertaker back then. Comes on the ice, and Brown, after the warm-up and between periods, would always take off his jersey because he was just so hot, and he would take off his jersey. So when he found out there was a fight going on, he said, why am I going to put my jersey on? So Dave Brown makes his way onto the ice. Now, at that point, he makes his way onto the ice. He's looking for Chris Nilan. Chris Nilan's already on the ice. And the only guy that Nilan sees that he can probably, he sees Big Shell Samuelson, who's like 6 foot 1,000, but says, like, this guy doesn't know how to fight. Like, what am I going to tangle with this guy for? There's nothing to do. So kind of leaves him alone. And Brown is looking for Nilan. So Brown is actually chasing Nilan. And Nyland's probably wondering what his strategy is going to be in the fight. So he sees that Brown doesn't have a jersey on. All he's got is the suspenders. And so you got really nothing to grab onto because, as you know, fighters usually grab onto either the jersey around the neck area or usually, pretty much where your biceps are type of thing. And you're grabbing onto the jersey there. So Nyland's got nothing to grab onto. Brown is basically skating, attacking Nilan. Nilan is kind of like backing up, skating backwards, backing up, skating backwards, backing up, trying to find a spot there. And Chris Chelios gets in between and breaks them up and says, no, you guys can't do this and all that stuff. But all of a sudden, Dave Brown is really trying to get at Chris Nilan. He's going crazy. Anyway, they went. And at one point, Brown, who was, probably a good 6'5" and like just so difficult to fight back then. A lot of people thought he was the toughest guy in the National Hockey League. Chris Nilan was probably the most courageous, who had the best defense. He can really defend really, really well. But it was a tough fight because Dave Brown had a huge reach advantage. And he had the advantage, of course, that he wasn't wearing the jersey. And Dave Brown got after him. At one point, looked like Knuckles went down a little bit, but got right back up. And then Dave Brown whispers in his ear, have you had enough? And Knuckles says no, and Knuckles keeps on throwing them. Speaking of which, here, let's take a look at here's Knuckles earlier tonight from the beach, telling us exactly what happened on this day back in
37 years ago today. Knuckles was on the Forum ice fighting Big Dave Brown with no jersey on. I'll never forget it. It was one hell of a night. The Brawl to end all brawls. I remember he come out with no shirt on. I said, shit, I wish I thought of that. Funny, I had him on the podcast. He said, listen, I didn't think of that. I just always took my shirt off. I didn't put it on when I went out. I could have used something to grab onto that night. Nothing to grab onto. Anyway, but today, this anniversary. I'm sitting on a beach in Hawaii, getting some nice sun on those beat up bones of mine. So sun feels great. Yeah, nothing like it. Away from that brawl to end all brawls.
And there you have it. There's Knuckles Nilan. We hope Knuckles is having a good time in Hawaii with his lovely Jimmy. All right, okay. So I talked to you about Ron Hextall. He's the only one that was not on the ice. You're probably wondering why. Like I mentioned, Hextall was amazing in those playoffs. And Mike Keenan locked Ron Hextall in the dressing room. That's right. He locked him in the dressing room. Hextall was pleading for him to go on the ice, pleading with him to go on the ice. And he said, you know what, just let me go. I'll grab somebody and I'll just, I'll hold on to somebody, but I'm not going to end up fighting. They didn't need him to do that. Once again, I think they had seven players that were dressed more than the Montreal Canadiens. So they had the numerical advantage. And Mike Keenan basically said to Ron Hextall, somebody's going to sucker punch you. Somebody's going to sucker punch you. I'm not going to make that happen. And he locked him in the locker room. So, we saw everything. The brawl, by the way, lasted about 9.5 minutes. And it started once again with Hospodar and Lemieux. And then Knockbauer comes on the ice and he goes after Larry Robinson. Now, Larry, of course, was, a veteran in the National Hockey League, probably 36 years old at the time, much respected. Obviously, his fighting days were behind him. But Knockbauer got in a couple of shots on Robinson, who tried to, give him a couple of shots back, but his shots weren't as effective or didn't land as much as Knockbauer's. But he held on to him, and then Knockbauer gets away, and Shane Corson goes after Knockbauer. And they're throwing them pretty good. The one guy who did really well in all the fights was John Kordic, who had the edge on Stanley. He did pretty well for himself. And it was a crazy night at the Montreal Forum. 3-4 players from each team could have been ejected from the game. In the end, it was only Ed Hospodar, if memory serves me well, who was ejected. And Brawl lasted 9.5 minutes. Game started 35 minutes late. And one of the things that was really important to point out in that game is that Nilan was spent. Here's a guy who's giving up a big-time weight differential to Dave Brown. That fight sucked everything out of him. And it sucked a lot out of the Montreal Canadiens players, who once again were outnumbered. And I think the Canadiens started the game well, but it was the Philadelphia Flyers in the end who got the game-winning goal. And there was a turnover. I could be wrong. I believe Robinson was paired with Chelios, and I believe Chelios turned the puck over. And it led to a Rick Tocchet and Brian Propp 2-on-1 with Larry Robinson. And Tocchet gave it to Propp because Propp was a 40-goal scorer at the time. But Propp gave it back to Tocchet. Larry Robinson put his stick down on the ice to try and block off the pass, actually kind of like laying it down on the ice. And basically, there was this much, or very, very little, as there was very little space underneath the stick, and the puck went underneath that space, and it went back to Rick Tocchet. It was a give and go that ended up giving the Flyers a 4-3 lead, and that's the way it ended. And then when all was said and done, the guys are shaking hands and wishing the Philadelphia Flyers the very best in the Stanley Cup final, but they ran into Gretzky and company, and they ended up losing Game 7. But once again, Ron Hextall ended up winning the Conn Smythe. It was after that brawl that there were a lot of rule changes in the National Hockey League, to ejections, to misconducts, to penalties. And what was crazy, too, is that I think it was Andy Van Hellemond who was reffing the game, but he didn't know exactly what was going on. He didn't know exactly who it was that started it. And at one point, I think they called Bob Gainey into the referee room Bob Gainey went into the referee room, and I think it was Dave Poulin, I think, for the Philadelphia Flyers, who went into the referee room as the referee just wanted to ask him, who started it, what happened. Brad McCrimmon, by the way, don't know if I mentioned this, Brad McCrimmon and Brad Marsh, I think I had said it was Poulin and Marsh. It was actually Brad McCrimmon and Brad Marsh were the first of the Philadelphia Flyers to jump on the ice after Hospodar and Resch, and the first Canadiens to jump onto the ice after Corson and Lemieux were Patrick Waugh and Chris Nilan. And it was crazy. At one point, Nilan went from behind Brown, and he actually started choking him before they ended up squaring off. It was just crazy. But once again, there were players on the ice who didn't have their skates on, and it was extremely dangerous. I mean, everyone was scared. You can catch all the clips on YouTube because of copyright laws and stuff like that. Obviously, I can't play some of the clips, but it's one of those that you have to see them. It's not the worst brawl that I saw. The one versus the Nordiques on Good Friday was a very, very ugly one. I'm trying to remember what year that was. I'll guess it was 1984, but I could be wrong. That's the one where Louis Slager sucker punched Jean Hamel, who went down, was knocked out, ended up losing vision in one eye. And it was... that was a crazy brawl where the Hunter brothers actually ended up fighting each other. Chris Nilan bloodied Randy Moeller in that brawl as well. So that was a crazy brawl. But this one versus the Flyers was very, very unique because once again, it was during pregame warmup. Once again, when you got to the broadcast, they actually had it taped and they showed it to you, delaying the broadcast 17 minutes. The game, ended up starting 35 minutes late. Hospodar was ejected. The referees didn't see a lot of things. We're asking some of the players on the other team who started it, how did it happen. It was a crazy. And why? Because of a superstition. And in the summer of 1987, the NHL put in a rule, 70.1, to penalize players who left the bench to get into a fight, 10-game suspension, and a maximum $10,000 U.S. fine, fining coaches who also accidentally would lose control of their players. And look, probably should have went in earlier than that, but it's because of that they actually implemented some of those rules. So it was just crazy. It was just a very, very crazy night. If you have any questions, it's an abbreviated version of the Sick Podcast tonight. As I told you that I would be doing some abbreviated versions. Jimmy, who's training right now under Shane Gaumont, I got it right. It was 1984, but Jimmy, my man, has given me the exact date of the Good Friday brawl between the Nordiques and the Canadiens, April 20th, 1984. Thank you very much, Jimmy, and we wish Jimmy all the best, of course. And period number one is over between the Edmonton Oilers and the Vancouver Canucks, and Edmonton is up by a score of 1-0 on a goal by Leon Draisaitl. If you have any questions and you want to throw them out, I'll probably stick around for a couple of minutes. Says Ryan Baker, Chris Nilan hated brawls too. He did. He said that he hates brawls because they're very dangerous. They are very, very dangerous. DJP says Kordic was a beast. Yes, he was. God rest his soul. Quick John Kordic story for you. My father was a tailor by trade. And at one point, there was a store in Carrefour Angrignon that actually needed a little bit of help. And my sister had actually gone to apply. And I don't think they ended up hiring her, but they asked for your father's profession. And she said, my father's a tailor. And they said, well, we're in a jam right now. We really need one. And, my dad was busy as it was, but he liked to help people out. So he said, yeah, I can help you out during this busy part of your season that you have. So he helped them out, and John Kordick came in one day and picked out some stuff, and my father altered the suits for John Kordick. So he had a chance to meet John Kordick. My dad did. I don't believe I ever did. I would have remembered if I actually did, but I don't believe I ever met John Kordick. Oh, I met him. I saw him at the Stanley Cup Parade in 1986, but I never, really met him and had a conversation with him. But Chris Nilan was tough. John Kordick, and he was very defensive with a great defense and a great uppercut. John Kordick threw a lot more punches, but he took a lot more punches. Kordick was a lot more spectacular in his fighting technique, but if you talk to people who actually ended up fighting both, they would tell you that Chris Nilan's punches hurt more than John Kordick's punches, even though it looked like Kordick was throwing bombs. Not really. Kordick and Miller had some tilts back in the 80s, folks. It all started, I believe, in the 1986 playoffs, and they had some dandies where, and I saw Kordick win all of them but one. On one occasion, Jay Miller had John Kordick pinned onto the ice. I believe that one was a decision for Jay Miller. But that's it. That was one of the scariest brawls once again, because just of all the way it went down, the Canadiens unnumbered, and some players didn't have their skates on, and it was ugly. Those brawls are really scary because you don't know who's going to hit you from behind. Sometimes you could be squaring off with somebody, or you could just be taking somebody aside, and all of a sudden you get sucker punched. That's what happened to Jean Hamel back on the 20th of April, 1984. Says Bobby, Nilan mastered the hockey art of dirty boxing, stayed real close, used uppercuts a lot, and he was a pit bull. His grip was absolutely fierce. Claude Lemieux, 234 playoff games, 5th all time, says Stéphane in Quebec City. Wow. Says the Whipper, Robinson, and McPhee can fight too. They definitely can. Others coming in. Bobby says he didn't hate brawls. He actually liked seeing brawls happen, but they're scary. And I'm glad we haven't seen a brawl in a long, long time. There was actually a brawl between Canada and Russia at one point where the lights went off. Was that in Piestany? I believe it was. But anyway, that was probably one of the scariest ones ever. That one was crazy. I want to thank Shane Gaumont on Master Control and Jimmy, who trained this, who's training right now under Shane. Once again, it's an abbreviated version of the Sick Podcast because we want to get you back to your playoff games. I hadn't gone live yet in the playoffs. I figure, you know what? I'm going to go live at one point here. And tonight I thought was the perfect night right after the Boston game. Have a chance here to get off after the first period of the Edmonton-Vancouver game, so I can get off and I can get you back to the second period and the rest of the hockey game. What was the most anticipation you ever felt for an upcoming season, Tony? The most anticipation I ever felt for an upcoming season? Geez, that's a good one. I don't know. The year of the centennial, I thought, you know what? This is going to be a special year. It's the year of the centennial. It means a lot to the organization. You would think they're going to do good things. They made the playoffs, but they got swept in 4 games. Ryan Katz says, Craig Cox said that John Kordick never hurt him. No, he never hurt him, but Craig Cox was a big, tough guy. He played for the Vancouver Canucks, but they had a fight at the old Montreal Forum where Cox had not studied John Kordick. John Kordick was a lefty. And the Kordick started off his fight where he would fake a right, fake a right, fake a right, fake a right. And the first left that he connected on Cox, he surprised Cox and he split him right open. And after the fight was over, and it was over probably in about less than 30 seconds, decision John Kordick, unanimous one. Craig Cox was bleeding profusely and the blood was just dripping down his face. So Craig Cox can say that John Kordick never hurt him, and he's probably right. But John Kordick did cut him open and did win his fight. Cox probably has the stitches to show for it today. Anyway, the second period is probably going to start in a couple of minutes between the Edmonton Oilers and the Vancouver Canucks. We have a contest that I need to talk to you about. Take a look at this beauty. So this beauty here is courtesy of Era Frames. And we've had a contest going on. And all you have to do is follow the Sick Podcast on Twitter. You have to repost it, and you have to comment Sick. And if you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, you actually get another entry. It's a Samuel Montembeault. There's only one of 5 in the world. It's actually behind me right now. And it's bubble wrap, so I'm taking care of it. And it's right up against my wall. And it's going to go to a lucky winner. So stay tuned for that. So special thanks to Era Frames, who does amazing work. And the division of their sporting frames is the unrivaled division. So special thanks to them. Amazing stuff. Once again, if all goes well, Craig Button tomorrow night, and then George Larac on Thursday night for Shane Gaumont and Master Control and Jimmy, who's training under him. Thank you very much for watching. And once again, follow us on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's absolutely free. And if you like the Sick Podcast, leave us a 5-star review. It's our way of feeling the love. For Gaumont and trainee Jimmy, I'm Marinaro.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, driven to be different. LaVie.tv, embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination.